I don't know what Acer was thinking when they put out this monitor. It is freaking huge, 170 hertz refresh rate. It's a FreeSync premium monitor. It's of course part of their Nitro lineup. At the end of the day, I have to tell you, it's definitely worth you looking at. And that of course is the Acer Nitro XV320QU. Don't click away. There's a lot to hear. This is probably one of the best picks you can get out there right now for a large 32-inch monitor, but there are some drawbacks, some things that you want to be aware of so you don't jump in and get a monitor that you don't really like. So let's jump into it. Well, as you know, I always like to jump in and tell you a little bit about the specs on this bad boy, so let's go ahead and talk about it. Of course, this is a 32-inch 1440p, 165 hertz with a overclock mode to 170 hertz refresh rate. It does feature that FreeSync Premium and boasts as low as a 0.5 millisecond gray-to-gray response time. And Acer is very well known for their hyper accurate IPS displays, and this monitor doesn't fall short on that. It does feature their Splendor IPS panel, which gives it a good calibration out of the box and great presets if you're worried about color accuracy. Now, one of the other things I would mention is the fact that it's 250 peak nits of brightness, so take with that what you will, and we'll explore it a little bit later. And in case you were wondering about the I/O on the back, this bad boy has two HDMIs, count them, one display port, a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, and in fact does actually have built-in speakers. And the aesthetics don't disappoint. The back on here has this really cool triangular looking grid pattern. It has that black and red accent to it. It actually has a full pivot, a full height adjustment, and tilt, which I love. The pivot sits on a little disc that spins. It makes it super easy to maneuver it on your desk. And then they top that all off with this tiny little wire management. It works, it's functional, it looks cool, it's not the best. But I'm not going to get too far into detail. I did a full review on this monitor that you can check out on the channel. I'll put a link down below for you guys to check out, or just go to the homepage and look at my most recent videos. So if you haven't watched my videos before, I kind of show you how to unlock all the features on the Xbox in the video. I do want to confirm that we were able to get full support of all resolutions that a 1440p monitor would support. It is kind of that nice, awesome, solid monitor for all performances with the Xbox. But I do have to mention something which we'll cover later, and it's the fact that HDR, it didn't really auto switch, and I had to go in and change it on the monitor. It was a bit of a pain during the setup process because I didn't know if I was in HDR or not, and had to go in many times to check and make sure to turn it on or turn it off. Now I'll point out that the Xbox does kind of lock down some of the menus as far as calibration goes. You can't change some of the gaming settings such as like pixel response rate and so on. It's not entirely locked down, but there are some things that really aren't compatible with the Series S, but it wasn't so much that I was upset about it. And last but not least, the Xbox does support the variable refresh rate technology with this monitor because it's a FreeSync premium monitor. You know that Xbox supports that pretty much through and through for the most part on new generation monitors. So that's a win. So that's enough about the Xbox. Let's jump into the PlayStation 5 and the setup of that bad boy and how it really went. Well, as you can expect, the VRR, it isn't there for this monitor in the PlayStation 5. Either is the auto low latency mode. It's kind of a bummer. I wish some of these newer releases featured that, but you may not need all of it all at once, all together right now, because there are some benefits here. And those benefits are of course the fact that this monitor does allow 4K 60 Hz HDR functionality on the PlayStation 5. Once again, the HDR doesn't tend to auto switch, you have to manually switch. And on top of that, it does allow 1080p 120 Hz HDR as well, which is fantastic in my opinion for 1440p gaming at high refresh rate. because that monitor is going to upscale that 1080p resolution just a little bit. And the last thing I'll mention is settings. What to expect when you open the menu here with the PlayStation 5. Once again, the HDR doesn't auto switch. It does lock down some of the settings within game, depending on if you're in HDR or not. Do check out my full review if you want to see an in-depth on the actual menus of this monitor before purchasing. But it's kind of locked down, not entirely. It did allow a good amount of calibration for me, enough so that I was happy playing on console. So we're going to start with the Series S here and play a little Apex Legends, something that I've been getting into a little bit more lately. It's been a fun game. It's got good graphics, in my opinion, and it's a good first-person shooter style game. The only downside is on console, you could be limited to 60 frames per second. So keep an eyeball out for that, but we're going to jump in and start testing. And as always, I open up that menu, I do a bit of calibration. I want that saturation to be on point, I want the hue to be on point. I don't want these neon looking colors that overtake the screen, and this monitor actually does a fantastic job of that. And here's something that I'll point out, you guys. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see I'm actually pretty far away, and I'm using this bow with explosive arrow tips. And I'm just aiming in on this dude. He's pretty far away, but I can make out his character. I can see him moving, and I'm able to get that shot on target and make that hit from, you know, like 200 yards out. That's pretty impressive on a 32-inch monitor. It means that the lighting panel actually does a good job of giving a good contrast and keeping up with the resolution of the display. And that's a big reason to go 1440p over 1080. Even if you're playing 1080p, the pixel per inch density is much better on 1440p, albeit we're gaming at 1080, it's still fine. So jumping over the PS5, same thing, I kind of have to change some of the settings. It actually performed almost opposite to the Xbox. I actually had to bring up the brightness, I had to change the saturation around, and do a quite drastic change to my calibration. You see there, once again, I had to turn that HDR to auto because it didn't switch immediately into HDR. And I actually prefer HDR on the PlayStation 5 here because it brightens up the display more so than SDR does. But I wanted to gauge this drop in because I'm actually falling pretty fast, and I paused a couple of times here, and the image itself is staying extremely sharp. There's no motion blur, no double imaging, and I'm moving pretty quick right there. So I stop and I do a little test just to make sure that everything is smooth, and I start to move back and forth. You can see in the top right corner here, 60 frames per second, and that's a limitation of this game, so it doesn't really actually utilize the full potential of this monitor. And at 60 frames per second, what we're seeing is actually quite a bit of world motion blur, some double imaging happening here. And that's where some extra calibration can come in, pixel response rate, that sort of thing may be able to help. But I did do a bit more calibration here and change some things around, and naturally it didn't bother me. And this is a testament to that, right? Because I hit the zip line, I'm going to meet with my buddies at the top of this building here, and I see someone down below, and I actually start to take shots at him. We pause in the middle of all of that, and it's actually crystal clear. So when it matters most, and after calibrating the display, I actually get a very, very crystal clear image as seen here. Long story short, I end up kind of hunkering down on top of this building because there's about 2 or 3 teams below me, and I'm like, there's no way I'm going down unless somebody's coming after me. So that's what I do, and this is epic, you guys. I see this guy, I'm falling down this elevator here, he's trying to, you know, shield up or something like that, and I look down, and in midair, boom, I take him out. You know, he's just, boom, one shot. Well, he's not done yet, but I do take him down. He puts his shield up to try to reflect me. It's too late. It's too late. I got the jump on him, literally got the jump on him midair, and that's what good monitors do for you. Now, the last bit I'll mention about Apex Legends, just generally speaking across any console, is the fact that the screen is still a bit large, and you do see a tiny bit of banding from it. Not a lot, it's a teeny bit. And with 32 inches, any monitor can be a little hard when playing FPS from searching the screen, you know, so it can be a bit of a challenge, and I did notice that happening a little bit, but it's something that can be overcome if you're used to it. And not really a dog on this monitor, just more or less what I experienced. So that then brings us to Warzone, which we know for a fact we are going to get 120 Hz, and with the Xbox, which we're starting with, we're going to be getting that variable refresh rate. So I actually expect the motion to be key on this, but nonetheless I was able to do a bit of calibration, bring down some of that white level so it doesn't look so blown out, and get some of that detail, that richer color out of the panel. And that's due to the calibration ability of the monitor. I was actually able to go in, change the color temp, change the gamma, change some of the black level, and really get in and fine tune it. And you can see once I do, the graphics are actually turning out pretty good. I mean, it's not amazing, but here I am aiming down sights at a guy down here below prison. I can make out the detail. I'm using a pistol. I'm pretty far away. The scope is lined up perfectly. I'm getting shots at him. I wasn't able to take him down, but it was enough so that I could scare him off. And then a little bit faster paced action. I'm kind of leaning over the edge here, expecting somebody to be coming in late on the circle. And of course, they're there. And in the middle, I pause. There's a teeny bit of kind of outline with that character, a little bit of glow to his character. But for the most part, the world itself, there's no double imaging. The motion's holding strong. And this is actually, in my opinion, this is a pretty epic interaction here. I'm like running across this ledge. This dude peeks his head out and bam, I turn. I can make out his character. There's a teeny bit like that door here at top of prison is actually kind of showing up twice. The image has shifted over to the right a little bit. Even pausing again, I totally missed the guy. It shows a good example of like, hey, even in the most extreme settings, you're maybe at most getting a double image and still able to make them out. It's not perfect. Again, we're on console. We're on the Series S, the least powerful console that's out there, and it's actually doing a fairly decent job here. But that's where the PlayStation 5 really makes up for what the Xbox Series S doesn't have. The Series X would probably perform more similar to this, in my opinion. And here we are, we're at 1080p, 120 Hz gaming. You can see it, top right corner, there's no variable refresh rate. But look at those graphics coming in. Look at the actual rendering capability of the PlayStation 5 on this monitor. It shows you that there's so much more potential on this monitor than what you can get with the Series S. Color is just a lot more rich and full. These fast-paced interactions, like this one. I'm just gonna pause on this one, you guys. Guy creeps around the corner. He thinks he's gonna get me. He tries to shoot me from behind, whips around the corner, and I'm already taking him out. And that's exactly what good motion will do, and proves my point, you guys. Like, you can actually see that the PlayStation 5 kills it for motion. Kills it. Took this dude down, destroyed him. No ghosting, no double imaging, no smearing happening here. And that's all because we actually matched the monitor with the performance of the console we're using. Oh, I just had to laugh at this interaction, you guys. Like, here we are, we're getting pretty close to the final circle, I think. And I'm just trying to get my loadout here. I've been getting slammed on. And I go to pick up my loadout. Not only am I getting shot from other directions, but I literally get ran over by a truck. Like, that is just my luck. You guys have all been there in Warzone. It happens every so often. You just get slammed. But the last thing I'll mention here is, as I'm dropping in on that, compare this to the Series S on this monitor. I mean, what we have is some rich golden brown looking grass, green grass, good brick, good roads. We're making out great detail in the water. And it's all very uniform, you know? There's no oversaturation. There's no IPS glow in the corners. Like, it's performing extremely well for a 32-inch monitor. That's my take on Warzone here, you guys. Let's jump in. We're gonna test out a more simple game to play, and of course, that's gonna be the fan favorite, Fortnite. And one thing I will mention is that the black level performance and shadow detail, it's doing okay, but as you can see here, I'm having to jump into the menus and actually bring that brightness and contrast up a little bit, because in HDR, in Fortnite, it's actually very, very dark. And that's with the Series S. But none of that really mattered because the color was on point. The motion was fairly decent, as you see as we pause here. There's no tearing, there's no motion blur, there's no double imaging happening. And with that color accuracy of the Splendor IPS that Acer Nitro provides, this is actually a very, very good experience. So games like this on the Series S would actually be a very, very good pairing with this monitor in the Series S. But this is what I mean. Again, going back to, you need to match the monitor to pair with something that can render and give graphic intensity that will actually look good on this monitor, and that's the PlayStation 5 for you. As I drop in on this game, we see all those bright, vivid colors, the aqua look of the actual water. You see your purples and green hues, and it's not overbearing. This was, in my opinion, one of the best monitors for Fortnite that I've used, because it's a large screen. It's so uniform, the colors were very accurate, and overall the motion held up extremely well. Now, it's not all good, because I did experience some kind of crushing of detail in dark areas. It wasn't bad to the point where I couldn't play. That's because this monitor is 250 peak nits of brightness. A good monitor is about 300 to 400 peak nits of brightness. So when you're playing in those ultra dark areas, especially if HDR is on, you're just not going to get the contrast and the shadow detail that you want out of it. Either you got to really calibrate it and tailor it to those darker games, or just kind of avoid those darker scenarios. It was better than the Series S for sure, but there's still a bit of a concern there. Enough on gaming, you guys. We've talked enough about the motion, the color, and all that other stuff. We're gonna get into something that you're probably gonna mostly use this for if you have a console and a 32-inch monitor, and that is content. Streaming content, 4K, downscaled 60 Hertz. Let's jump in, you guys. We're gonna start with the Xbox. We're gonna do a little bit of that Disney Plus and show you a few HDR movies. So as always, I love this scene in the beginning of Star Wars because it gives you a really, really good contrast point. And with HDR on, we're getting a decent amount of good contrast and black level performance here. You're actually making out stars here fairly well, and the black of space is actually black. It looks good. And you do get some advanced calibration menus to be able to kind of manage that black level performance. But one thing that, you know, I always want to compare it to is the SDR and see how well it looks. So similar performance here on that star field, but as we start to pan down, we're gonna look at that planet and see if there's any difference here. It's definitely not as bright. That planet's not as bright, but you are getting more actual detail out of that planet in SDR. The color range isn't as good, and that contrast isn't as good either. But let's compare a few more clips here. Oh yeah, this is rough. So this is an HDR, and we have BB-8 here, and we're really dark backdrop, really dark scene in the movie, and you really can't make out any details, like almost none. It's pretty rough. And it really isn't until we get into the later scenes where they're actually firing some of their plasma pistols and there's actual lights coming on until we can really see what's going on. And again, I've done a good calibration here, bringing up that brightness. Here I am in SDR going through the same clips, and you can tell here you're getting much better uniformity to the brightness. Like, you're able to pick up the sand and parts of BB-8 as he's making his way back to the battlefield. So thinking that maybe the Series S was the main culprit here and that it just didn't have the power, which is not really possible, but just didn't have the power. Let's just pretend that we believe the Series S doesn't have the power to produce the HDR that we wanted. Let's jump into the PlayStation 5 and test out some similar scenes and see what happens here. So starting at 4K HDR here, that star field, it's looking okay, you guys. You know, it's not quite the same scene. We are able to make out some of the stars in the star field. So this scene, I really like the fact that we pan down and we get to see this red planet. Gives us an idea of the overall detail that we can get in those shadow and dark areas. And then the next scene here, and it's very dark. I mean, it's really dark, but then you have these pops of light that come through. Like, the lightsaber is red, and then you have a deep amber reddish hue in the background. You know, you can make out some good detail, but overall, in those dark areas, extremely hard to see. Extremely hard to make out, like the texture of the clothing and the look on the people's faces. Same thing, SDR. We're actually getting much brighter stars here. This is looking really good. Oh, and we saw those fighters. I didn't see those fighters on the last scene. The planet, you're actually able to see more detail in. You're picking up actually all of this stuff over here that was not seen originally in HDR. And then again, we still get that amber hue in the background and that good red pop of the lightsaber, but we're getting the full expression on his face. And we're actually able to make out what's going on around him and who he's actually fighting against. My conclusion there would be that the SDR again, on these darker movies, just do standard dynamic range. Don't do HDR on these darker movies. Maybe a really bright movie, you can do HDR. It's gonna make sense. Like any of the Marvels movies, action style, Tom Cruise movies, like Top Gun Maverick is gonna look really good on this style of monitor. Oh, anything animated too is probably gonna look really good. All right, you guys, we're gonna wrap this bad boy up with the downsides and the upsides and whether or not I'd recommend this to you for your next console gaming monitor. So, before we do that though, I got something real big to tell you. So scoot in a little bit closer. No, a little bit closer. Like right here. I need you right here with me. Hey, I need you guys to subscribe to the channel. I'm not gonna ask more than once in this video, but I need you to subscribe. We got about 96% of you guys aren't subscribed watching these videos. And I love that you guys are watching it, but it'd be fantastic if you subscribe. That way YouTube knows we're doing good things here and you guys are enjoying these videos. Without further ado, and without saying any more, we're gonna jump into it, starting with the downsides. So the downsides, in my opinion, are pretty obvious. I think I showed them pretty well on the video. And the first is, of course, going to be the lack of HDR performance. Just that inability to really utilize the HDR in every setting and its inability to switch. It didn't really make it an HDR focused monitor for me. And that leads into the downside number 2, which is the fact that it's only 250 peak nits of brightness. And I would expect something this size 32 inch that costs $399 should probably be closer to like 300 to 400 peak nits of brightness. So it definitely scores it a little bit lower on my list, although it wasn't terrible in every setting. And the third, which really relates to this video, is the fact that this monitor wasn't really made for console gamers. You know, the fact that HDR doesn't auto switch and it doesn't detect and it doesn't really have any of the advanced features of PlayStation 5, some of the newer releases like variable refresh rate, and in fact doesn't even have the auto low latency mode. And then on the Series S, again, it didn't auto switch HDR and kind of struggled in some of the HDR and brightness settings. You know, it kind of leads me to believe that Acer didn't really think about consoles when it made this monitor. It kind of just threw in the hardware that was the most recent and said, here, we're actually really making this for PC because it's a beast if you can use that full 170 Hertz. But on console, you don't get to utilize a lot of those advanced features. But that's kind of why I mentioned it to you guys at the beginning of the video. This thing is a freaking beast. It has some good upsides. And if you're a dual user, PC and console, there's some upsides that I'd like to mention to you and reasons why it might be a good fit. The first upside is going to be the size and uniformity. For being 31 inches, it's actually quite sleek on the desk. It's not too big. And because it's so large, you would think that you might have an issue with like contrast or detail or pixel density, things like that, and that really wasn't the case. The second is going to be the fact that they use the Splendor IPS, well, what they call their Agile Splendor IPS. It's a pre-calibrated IPS panel that's going to give you great color accuracy for gaming. And things like the PlayStation 5 gave you a glimpse into what that looks like. But I'm telling you, on PC, it's actually much, much better. And then the third upside is, of course, you know, the price. I don't think $399 is terrible for a 32-inch 1440p 170 Hertz monitor. So that kind of brings me to the end and whether or not I'd recommend it. And I never give a direct answer when I recommend monitors. I just don't, because each scenario is different. But I will say it needs to be on your top 3 list if you are a PC user and a console gamer. Without a doubt, if you do both, this is going to fit as a fantastic 1440p monitor with all of the benefits it has. But if you're just buying for console, do not buy this monitor. I'm telling you right now, if you're buying just for console, don't buy this monitor. Go get the M32Q or the, there's a few Asus monitors 32 inches. There's a few MSI monitor 32 inches that I've reviewed on the channel that performed much better on console, in my opinion, than this one. And in fact, I would buy the BenQ EX2510S before buying this, especially if I'm doing PlayStation 5 only. So that's all I really have to say, you guys. I've talked enough in this video. So subscribe to the channel. I'm gonna put a little playlist up here in the corner for you guys to check out all the other console reviews that I've done for monitors. There's full in-depth, everything from like 8 minutes up to like 26 minutes. There's tons of monitors in there, 1080p, 1440p, 4K. So if you're looking at monitors for your console, please click on this list because it's going to be extremely helpful for you. All right, you guys, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.